Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Well, this post covering finance and property with a distinctly Australian flavour. It's a Monday evening, a cold Monday evening. So we have a warm pussycat and Edwin. Hi, Edwin.
G'day, Martin. You know, they tell me that body heat's the best type of heat, so snuggling up to Evan at the moment because we ran out of redheads.
Yeah, it's certainly cold, isn't it? I took the dogs out earlier on and they were very, very pleased to come back in and sit somewhere warm again. So we're in the midst of winter.
Yeah, well, as long as you don't go out and ride a bike, Martin. Yeah, bikes are dangerous. They've got a mind of their own, just like the economy at the moment. It's unpredictable, and you have to pedal like mad to get ahead. Otherwise, you just fall over.
Oh, well, you have to get an electric bike. That's the way to do it. Then at least you have some power there. But I'm afraid that I used to do a lot of cycling when I was younger, but I tend just to walk these days. It's safer.
Look, a lot safer. But then again, the leader of the free world, anything goes.
I guess
that might not even be a good idea for him to walk.
No, well, that's also possible, isn't it? Yeah. And look, what about this food price stuff then? It's pretty amazing, isn't it? But I gather you're going to switch crops.
I'm ditching the carrots, Martin. I'm ditching the carrots, and I thought about avocados because they were pricey. But it looks like avocados $1.99 each. But I'm going to ginger. That's it. I've decided that I'm going to start growing ginger at $39 a kilo. I mean, $39.99 a kilo. You can't go wrong. That's it. That's the carrot of the future, I say.
Well, the only question for you is, can you possibly grow ginger up in the Blue Mountains when it gets as cold as it does during the winter? It goes very nice up in Queensland. I remember visiting several ginger farms when I was up there, but it doesn't seem to grow down here very well.
Look, if you can launch rockets in the Northern Territory to see if there's any signs of life in other planets, to see how we can stuff up their planets, their economies. In their affordable housing, I'm sure I can grow ginger in the mountains.
All right, well, give it a try. I don't know whether it's feasible to take a piece of ginger from the shop and then try replanting it, but I'd give you a little tip. If you get one of those cos lettuces, right, you can actually take the bottom sort of inch or so with the roots, put it in some water, and let it actually sit there for about a week. It'll start to grow again, and then you can actually plant it in soil, and you can get perpetual cos.
Look, I'll give you another tip. If you go to as many open home inspections as we do, you see there's a lot of people with gardens. It's called the 5-finger discount, or the midnight spares, as we used to call it when we were younger. But then a lot of these homes of late that we've been attending, they've got these that are just left. The homes are vacant. So I don't know whether the value's in the home or the value's in the veggies at the back.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Anyway, how are we chatterers chattering?
Well, it's really interesting. Last week's been really interesting with regards to the chatter amongst the WeChat chatterers. And it's really they're giving the central government the middle finger. The central government's pushing, as you know, $12 trillion worth of stimulus with 12 trillion yuan, which is about 2.8 trillion Australian dollars in stimulus for the young people to basically buy their first homes. But they're saying over and over again, and there's been a big clash over the last week. If we can't get a job, we can't get married, how the hell, so we can't buy a house, how are we going to get married to have children? And that's the push really with the central government, is for them to get married, buy a home and have children. But they're giving them the middle finger, unfortunately.
Yeah, they don't want to play ball. And meanwhile, the Chinese economy wobbles on with a bit more stimulus here and there, and a bit less property over there, and lots of steel, but actually not much happening in the way of new construction. If you look at the floor square sort of amount that's actually being built now, it's way down from where it was.
Look, yeah, and it's look with regards to what's happening in China, and I mean, is it a reflection of also what's happening in the rest of the world, not only with the young people, basically giving the government the middle finger, as well as look at what's happening with the construction industry here in Australia itself, and in other parts of the world, where a lot of the building companies can't fulfil their orders, can't fulfil their construction the construction projects, can't fulfil the because of things are too expensive, and they can't get the labor. Predominantly, they can't get the workforce. You could say the manual labor that would assist the trades in order to be able to make the construction more affordable. So, is it really going to be? Is it going to be one of those chants that the chanting in China? Is it going to be a global chant? We are the last generation, and what does that mean for the global economies and the global the population? It sparks a lot of questions, Martin.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a lot of contention, I think, around. And, you're not quite sure how this is all going to play out. And actually, wherever you look, you can see cracks appearing, intergenerational cracks, actually, quite largely in many economies, from our own through to China and, even into Europe and the US. So lots of very, very concerning questions. But what about our old WeChat chatters locally? What's on their minds?
Look, this is an interesting topic. Obviously, they're constantly talking about all sorts of investments, predominantly right now, and for the over the last month or so, it's been housing and when to step in or back into the market. They're obviously asking themselves, is the market going to plateau? Has it met the bottom? Is it going to rebound? But overall, the main chatter that's coming out from all the groups is just borrow and keep it in an offset facility for those that have got property, for those that can, because they believe that borrowing is going to get tighter and harder in the future. And if you don't have the money to be ready when as they say, when more bargains start springing up, as to it's going to get harder to borrow later on. A lot of them are obviously also have moved away from buying any other asset class of investment, and they're keeping the money in the bank liquid and cash on hand, because they so believe that cash is king, and it will be in the near future. They're just asking the questions that I think a lot of people in all societies, in all walks of life here in Australia and Sydney in particular, are asking themselves: Have we bottomed out? Are we going to? How much further is it going to go? And when is the government going to start throwing the mattresses to cushion the falls?
Absolutely. Well, it is interesting that the lending criteria is tightening. I did a post yesterday on the borrowing power and how much that's been reduced, and so people can't get as big mortgages as previously, and it's going to get tighter. So for people who want to borrow and believe that it may be more difficult ahead, I suppose it makes some sense, except of course the interest rates are likely to rise, which means that the pincer movement of borrowing less but paying more is potentially going to play out.
Well, that's right. And the thing is when do those lines meet? Where do they cross over? Where does it become too much or too much to sort of pay back to borrow? When does it become? When do they cross over? When does it make more sense to jump in? I mean, there's so many moving parts, and I guess we were talking with the group yesterday, and we were basically saying we can't look at the market the way we used to look at the market 2 years ago or even 6 months ago. It's just everything's just moving so rapidly. It's not. You can't rely on historical factors anymore, historical trends, because governments, banks, institutions, are turning around and turning the policies and backpedaling on a lot of things, moving forward on other things, at a moment's notice. So, but what they are saying, Martin, is obviously that, as you said, it's going to get harder to borrow. Yes, they're going to pay more in interest rates, but you've got cash in hand, and you can do a lot more with cash in hand than with it in the never where you wouldn't be able to get as much for it later on. And then again, but it also come back to that question: when are we going to hit bottom? Have we hit bottom? Are we going to hit bottom tomorrow? Is it going to be next month? Is it going to be in 3 months' time? Is it going to be in 6 months' time? Is the government going to allow it? How far is the government going to allow it to go down this precipice or this well? How far are they going to allow it? And is it going to be just our federal government, or is there going to be a global trend that's going to emerge that's going to affect all the economies around the world? We don't know, and these are the unknowns. So they're just saying, be ready, be prepared, and better off with money in your hand than in the banks.
Well, it sort of makes some sort of sense, doesn't it? And I suppose as interest rates go up, you might be able to get a little bit more on term deposits if you get spare cash flushing around. But my own sense is that the capital values probably have more downside to slide at the moment, because I noticed that quite a few people over the last couple of weeks might have gone to auction, but then didn't manage to get a sale at auction. But after the auction, they've negotiated a sale, but typically 10 to 15% below what the auction was expected to get. So if you do transact, you have to transact below the market's expectation of just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, look, this is another thing that you and I talk about over and over again, and you can look at it from many different angles and many different ways. But it's really a buyer beware and be cautious, and getting the right information and doing all the background research and getting as much information from the selling agent as you can is going to put you in better footing than the next person that wants to buy as well. So I guess one thing is expectations, and in a way, I would say that maybe 60-70% of selling agents are translating what's happening in the market to their vendors. Yep. Vendors are still, 30-40% of vendors still got very, very high expectations. They still believe that the market will rise. But then again, we've also discussed the out-of-line sales, and where even I myself and my team, members of my team and others have been, we've been very much surprised as to the values that have been paid. There was a property that we're looking at for a client in Landila. It was acreage, well-built home, sheds, the whole bit, almost 5 acres, and it didn't sell at auction. Only one bid at auction of just a bit over 3.1 million, 3,150,000. The reserve was closer to the 3.5, between 3.5 and 3.6 is my understanding, and it didn't sell at auction, but it sold the day after. And they got 3,421,000. Now, but again, like you and I say, once you start getting into the background and understanding more as to what really happened, you would think, well, crap, why would you pay more if the highest bid, if you held the highest bid at 3,150,000 on the day, why would you go and throw in an extra 300,000 more the day after? What was the circumstance? What was what's the story behind all that? Well, the story is the purchaser got favourable terms. They got a 6-month settlement period until they get their affairs in order, and they've got the cash to buy. They just need to offload some other assets in order to basically buy, settle in cash without any borrowings from the bank. And for them, that extra 6 months, in the settlement period, is meant a lot more than that. Than the 300,000. So, and pristine home, grounds, the whole bit. So again, we go back to what is it that people are looking for, and the people that are buying these high price properties and others, and when you see the paying over the odds, it's more than just price. There's a lot more than just price. It's emotion, it's reasons for living in the area, schooling, and no need to worry about. You just get the key from the agent. bring your furniture in and close the door behind you and the rest of the world, because you've got all the creature comforts that you need, and you don't really need to go beyond that.
No, and you make a very interesting point about this idea of extended settlement. When I moved down from Sydney, the people who bought the property wanted to essentially apply for planning permission to make some major renovations and get builders and everything sorted out. So we had months and months and months of delayed settlement, which actually worked for us because we were then able to go and buy something with the deposit that we actually got, and then stage the move. So we actually saved quite a lot of money in that process. It's interesting. I think people sometimes don't understand that there is a quite feasible route to extend the settlement time if both parties actually agree, and it can make quite a difference in terms of planning the whole transition.
Well, look, and this is what we say to our clients, Mark. The negotiation isn't just doesn't just happen on the day. It could happen before the auction, and I mean, getting away from the auction, the purchasing on the day of the auction. It can be a win-win situation for both parties. For yourself, look, if as we've discussed, but if the party wants to settle a lot quicker, 80% of our clients are pretty much cashed up. The maximum that one will be borrowing is about is a 60% LVR. So in theory, we could even bring the settlement forward by 3 weeks. I mean, settlement can happen within 7 days.
Sure.
It really all dependent on on the mortgage or the mortgages, the bank solicitors, to discharge the mortgage and so forth. So realistically, I mean, I've been involved in settlements where they've happened over 3 days. So it's obviously there's a lot of push in there. It's more related to development properties, with land and so forth. But with regards to the negotiation can also benefit you as a buyer if you bring the settlement forward. Like there's a classic example right now. One of our agents is one of our associates is in dealing with a property in the Hurstville region that went to market with a guide of 1,250,000, and the agent's desperate to sell, and he called me. And he said, "Look, come to the auction. You probably get it for $1,050,000, which is $200,000 below the guide." And a sale in that street, 3 houses up from this house, very similar property, very similar land size, same era, same interior decor, just a little bit different in design of a home. Sold 4 months ago for $1,465,000. So now, being cheeky, I said, look, I said to my associate, look, offer them 930. And guess what? The agent said, come to the office. Come to the office, sign the contract, and I'll put it to the vendor. So why? Now you ask yourself, well, why are they prepared to accept that? One, because we offered short settlement. One, and secondly, the vendor didn't listen to her agent, her selling agent. And he said, don't buy a property in Queensland until we've sold your home. But she went and bought the home that she wanted to buy, and she's committed, emotionally committed there to the point where potentially, look, if the agent got given a fair campaign as opposed to a short auction that he has, if he got given a fair campaign, she may get 1,150,000, or she may get the 1.2. But it's a matter of time, and a lot of people do silly things. So this can also work in your favor. In this case, it is. So the negotiation can work both ways, as you say. And delayed settlements. I like delayed settlements myself because it gives you time to prepare, and it's a meeting of the minds of both parties, and it's a win-win situation. So it's. Negotiation is key, and understanding the background is also very much key to the transaction.
Now, there's an interesting question here because we are seeing prices dropping back quite fast, as we said. And I guess the question that we have to come back to is, so what levers are there potentially, right, to cushion the falls. And you've got to probably say, state and federal governments, are they going to do things? What do you think, Edwin? Do you think they're going to find these magic potions to keep prices up?
Well, that they are the $64,000 questions, aren't they? It was interesting that John Adams put up a tweet, and he tagged me on it after on his tweet and said, just went to an auction in the Illawarra for a 6-bedroom house, opening bid 1.75. No other bids came forward. Then the vendor's bid came in at 1.87. The property was passed in. Vendors don't understand the impact of monetary policy. Well, they may not understand the impact of monetary policy, but at the end of the day, there's also the question: did they really want to sell? Are they really on the market? Do they have to sell? Must they sell? But that led me to I was thinking about it a bit further, and obviously there's a big thread in that, and then I came up with some thoughts with regards to what we're going to talk about now, and that is what do you and I believe the government will do? To what levers they'll pull, or what ammunition does the government have in its arsenal, or are they all duds? To keep the listing numbers low, or to keep the demand up, or bring the demand up. So perhaps we should just get stuck into it and maybe ask ourselves that question. What do you think?
Look, there's a pantheon of things they could do, right? I suppose they could conjure up another version of COVID and lock everybody down again. That sort of had a significant impact last year in terms of listings and activity, freezing the market and making it very difficult to do things.
So you're saying, are you, in terms of percentage, or 1 to 10, or you want to go in percentages? I believe there's about a 70% chance that could happen in terms of new pandemics or disruptions. I'm 7 out of 10 on this one.
Yeah, okay.
Mainly because I was only a 50-50 on this, but not until the leader of the free world said last week in a speech, we need these trillions of dollars for the next pandemic.
Yeah. And it is interesting because there are some new variants of the Omicron, which is bumping around the place. Certainly in the UK, they've got major issues, and they're talking about significant concerns there. So it's definitely bumping around. And of course, China, and they're now talking about continued lockdowns into the middle of next year. So, it wouldn't be without form, would it?
No. Okay. So I'm calling it a 70% chance. Now, this obviously, what will this do? What this will do is what happened in 2021 when we saw for sale home listing numbers in the Sydney region go below 5,000, which was pretty scary. It was really, really scary, and people panicked. And then they went in and jumped in, boots and all, and threw everything at it. And I think that's when people started overpaying. And then by November, things started sort of slowing down. So in winter, or toward end of July, early August, we saw below 5,000, which was absolutely scary. So the same thing could happen. This is one way to obviously keep everybody indoors and take listings off the market. So that would have the opposite of what's happening now, which is we're getting a lot more numbers on market, and it's seasonally we should be retreating with regards to for sale listings.
Well, we'll look at the numbers shortly, but I guess another lever, which is to entice more first-time buyers to come back into the market and, give them extra incentives to, go and spend some more money. Of course,
we know that's there.
Yeah, we know that's there already. So the stamp duty tweak or land tax tweak, the first-time buyer incentives, they could double them or whatever, like they did in Western Australia, where both state and federal government threw incentives to first-time buyers. So they got $55,000 to $60,000 from those two sources, and of course prices went up by $50,000 to $60,000 immediately. But they had a huge pull forward from those, and that helped to blot up the properties that were there, and so listings dropped dramatically. So there you go. There's still more they could do if they wanted to throw more at first-time buyers. They could. Yeah.
So you've got the joint venture schemes, as I call them, or the government
the shared equity stuff you're talking about there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Shared equity in my ass. I call that the wolves in sheep clothing. Yeah. That's the, and it's interesting how that stimulus, I've now been hearing the mainstream media talk about what you and I were discussing, weeks, if not months ago, as to what that was going to bring about, and that is unaffordability in the space where the first home buyers could potentially come in and owning and begin the life's property journey in a home, and it's in that bracket that is going to be given a greater support, underlying support, and potentially lift those values. And that's the under the million, between the 750 to 950,000 bracket. For somebody you could pay 900 or 950. You'd be lucky if you can get it for $1 million or $1,050,000 once these schemes come in, especially if numbers retreat. So well, that's happening. So we know that that's happening already, and affordable housing is really out the door, because the government really wants to, is perhaps more in favour of protecting the overall economy, as opposed to, protecting the asset class as opposed to the overall economy.
And protecting builders, of course, by providing more support for them. But the fact of the matter is that we know every time first-time buyer incentives are in place, it just lifts all the boats, it lifts prices, it makes it harder for other people to get in. So it doesn't actually attract the right result. It doesn't actually solve the housing affordability issue. It actually makes housing less affordable, other than for those small number of people who actually manage to get those particular incentives and then get in. But I also note that quite often they get in and then things go wrong, like interest rates rise or whatever, and then it's a noose around their neck. So from all reasons, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. And also the other point I'd make, Edwin, that when you're actually pulled forward like that, you don't necessarily have the discipline either in saving or budget management. And so what that tends to do is to lead to then financial problems later, because you've now got this house and you've got to pay the rates and everything else and all those other things, and they just don't have the financial experience to manage it well. So default rates are quite a lot higher for those who have been incentivized to get into the market, whether it's the bank of mum and dad or whether it's other first-time buyer incentives. So this is, I think, a pretty short-term measure, but you'd have to say it's right up there in terms of, in the armory.
Yeah, look, and the unfortunate thing is the casualties of that is what they call friendly fire, and that is the general population, the first-time buyers that the government's so-called trying to help. Because they become fodder, in a sense, because they're that you get into mortgage stress, then you get into greater issues, socioeconomic issues. You get into issues that marriage breakdowns because of mortgage stress. In family breakdowns, and it just gets more and more expensive. So unfortunately, they get caught up in the friendly fire, and the casualties of that particular arsenal are the first home buyers themselves, the ones that are trying to help. So now, okay, so we know that's happening, and that's going to be short-lived, and there's going to be a lot of casualties of that one, casualties of war. Then there's the next one, Mexican standoff, mate. Mortgages versus rent. Which is cheaper? In some areas, you could say that the rents are becoming a lot more expensive than holding a mortgage. But these are areas where once again you're not getting individuals coming in with 10% deposits. And this is the thing that a lot of people have got to understand as well, that the people buying into these areas, not people that are either upsizing, individuals, expats coming back home, individuals that have cashed out of other asset classes and buying in with low LVRs. So and that's something that really has to be investigated as well a bit further. But in a sense, for the purpose of tonight's rant, you could say that's a bit of a Mexican standoff in where the mainstream media are going to be sort of talking about it and spruiking that side of things as well, in order to coerce people into jumping back into the market again, to create demand, to create more demand than the properties that are available.
Yeah, I've seen several articles already doing the calculations showing that renting is more expensive than buying, but actually they've made some very selective assessments on the buying side, right? And the other costs of managing the property and the rates and all those things, they're not included, so they're not actually a like for like comparison. And of course, the other point is that you have a much longer lead-in time to buy something, and if you need to sell it, a longer lead-in time to get out of it, so it's less flexible. So it depends what you want, but I'm sure it'll be there as one of those levers. But I've got another lever for you, and that is the 50-year mortgage, right? The most obvious thing, because go back 20 years, right? The average mortgage was 20 years, right? Then it went 25 years. Now it's about 30 years on average, right? So they've already extended it. But, why stop there? Let's make it 50 years, right? Because that then reduces the monthly repayment. Okay, you pay a lot more interest over the life of the loan, so the banks love that. And given the fact that APRA's come out recently and said that they need to dial back their loan-to-value ratios and their loan-to-debt-to-income ratios, right? The most effective lever they've got is just to extend the life of the loan. So there you go. That's another one. And that would actually encourage many more people to get in because they'd be able to borrow more for a longer period of time. And that would blot up some of the spare stuff. So I'm afraid that's on my list as well.
Yeah, but here's the twist, Martin. Here's the twist. Like we shared about three or 4 weeks ago when we were talking about this as well. Yeah, and I said that here's the twist. Your children and grandchildren can inherit that loan. You can will that loan.
Well, yeah, you can leave it in your will, right?
Why not?
Why not? Exactly right. Yeah, you may think you're going to get an estate, but surprise.
Yeah, well, that's where the bank has a foothold. Fundamentally, it's got foothold. You got the choice. Resign with us, and obviously, there's equity, but resign and we can extend the loan or whatever. I give that a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably there. And I suppose then the other one is immigration, right? Because if you bring a lot of new people in who can afford to buy, they're going to buy particular properties in particular areas, but that could be another one. And of course, we know that the borders are now sort of open, and we know that there are a lot of people internationally who look at Australia as a relatively nice place to come, and they are cashed up. So that, for me, is another one. Maybe there should be some sort of incentive for immigration for immigrants when they come in. They can get an extra grant to buy property.
Well, look, when we came over in the early 70s, my parents and the rest of us, the trip was paid for by the Australian government, and that was a lot of money back then. We flew from Ecuador to Peru. We stayed in Lima, all paid for. And by the government because of my father's the industry was in high demand here. His profession was in very high demand, and he ended up working in the oil rigs around Australia and all parts of and predominantly in Newcastle with high pressure welding and very, very specialized welding. And there was in his day. Him and a lot of his mates were very much sought after. They were earning big dollars back then. So who's to say that the government's not going to throw those sort of incentives across, apart from other incentives, as you said. Also watering down the requirements to obtain a PR. But look, let's not forget that there's already thousands of people already holding PR visas anyway that are just waiting for the right time to come over. They're either waiting to sell the assets that they have there in the countries that they're in. And this is outside of China. I'm talking about, as we've said before, America, Canada, Europe. I mean, Europe's becoming a bastard case every other day. And so more and more people are coming to Australia. A lot of people that I've spoken to, they've said, "Oh yeah, but and you've also mentioned, New Zealand's already gone down that path, but New Zealand isn't as attractive as what Australia is in terms of job prospects, industry and the economy. So it's something that people are looking, as you say, at Australia and Sydney in particular as a very favourable destination. So look, I think for me that's a 10 out of 10, and I think that's going to be apparent within the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, that's going to be soon. I agree with you, because of course other countries are also opening the doors as well. So you got to compete, right? So compete by giving the on ramp onto property. Makes sense. And then of course there's the other one which we should just come back to, because politicians of course look after their own, don't they? And guess what? Politicians have an over-representation of investment properties relative to the rest of the population.
And our Prime Minister leads that group, I think. Our current Prime Minister, if not, I know Paul Keating's got a fair few investments and he has got his fingers in a lot of pies. So he may still have. I mean, back in the day, he had a lot of pies which he put his fingers into. But yeah, look. Hands up, politicians that don't have a property portfolio. Is the interesting question to ask. And definitely, I don't believe that any politician. Look at what our Premier has done in unison with the federal government in offering the same incentive as the federal government. 40% for a new dwelling, 30% as a participation in owning a property or buying a property with an individual as a joint venture. There's no other term for it, really. To help and assist people that are coming in with only a 2% deposit, and again into that price bracket where the first time buyers that have been saving the 10-15% to come into the market and wanted to jump in. This is just. I don't think. Look, they may talk a different talk on stage or in front of the camera, but in reality, when if you got them in the pub having a drink, I'm sure they'll tell you that they've got no interest, no matter of what persuasion. Green, blue, red, white, Labor, Liberal, colour thumpian or whatever. They've all got them. And their interest is in not for this property market to collapse.
Yeah, but I tell you the one that won't be on the list, and that is a real substantive investment in social housing.
Of course not. Come on, Martin, wash your mouth out with soap, mate. Of course not. Even the current Prime Minister, the current party, since when? They've been in government for what? Just under a month or so. Okay, it's early days. But no one seems to be talking about real affordable housing, solutions. Nobody seems to be talking about the rental, stress that people are facing at the moment. People are going without heating. They're going out without regular meals, and I'm not talking about going out on a Friday night. I'm talking about regular meals every day of the week in order to afford a livable home, a place that you could call home, and you could consider as a home, and longevity of the environment that you want to be in. I mean, your other choice is go and rent a dog box in something that's unsafe, or you're going to a granny flat like the ones that I've posted up on Twitter, where there are absolute you wouldn't even put your mother-in-law in as long accommodation. You wouldn't. It's crazy stuff out there, Martin, and no political party is really talking about that. I mean, let's give it another month or two and see if they do start talking about genuine means and ways to assist people with regards to affordable housing, as to buy real measures, real policy, but more so to the point, to rent.
And the last one, before we move on into other areas, I think you've also got to understand they may well provide additional stimulus for more build to rent, right, which would help the supply, quote unquote, of property, but of course really would help the construction sector once again, and that isn't necessarily solving anything either.
No, and I tagged Dom. I've been trying to get him to come on the show with us, and I've tagged him on a number of tweets on Twitter, because that's the only way sometimes you get these people's attention. I know that he follows you and he follows me and a few of the others that are regulars on Walk the World, which is rather interesting when you look at his profile. And I keep on asking the question: when is the state government going to start putting pressure on local governments, local LGAs, in order for them to reduce the exorbitant fees that make it cost prohibitive to do something, even if you're not a developer, just to do something to subdivide a piece of land into a duplex, an old home into a duplex where you could stay and sell a smaller home, to the next family that wants to live in the area, or for the empty nesters to settle down in the same suburb. What are the choices? It's this prohibitive and restrictive LGA building codes and policies that they've got in place, and expensive policies that are got in place, that becomes very, very prohibitive to do anything like.
Yeah, well, it's everybody blaming everybody else, isn't it? So the feds blame the states blame the local councils, the local councils blame the states, etc. I mean, it all go around in this ever-decreasing circle of blame, but nothing actually changes, and all you end up with is, the stupidity that we've got in the markets. But interestingly,
go ahead. Now, I was going to say, but that keeps the property prices up.
Absolutely right, and isn't that part of it, right? So it's not my problem; it's somebody else's problem, right? Anyway, let's look at the numbers, right? Because the numbers are actually quite interesting.
Look, they are. And that was one of the last things in terms of the arsenals in the what do you call it, in the levers that the government has, is really to pull listings down. But even the mainstream voices, or the spruikers, or the marketers, the marketing companies out there are already basically telling the vendors to pull the properties off the market, because it's not a very good time to sell, because of the simple fact that what we're seeing over the last 4 weeks, and I've noted down for our viewers, as you share the last 4 Monday posts that are put on Twitter with regards to numbers, they just keep on climbing.
Yeah. Well, let's just go through them, Edwin. So the first week was 18,584. That's combined. This is in the Sydney area, housing apartments, right? The second week, it went up to 18,758, so that's a considerable rise. The third week, it rose again to 18,831, and today it's 18,993, knocking on 19,000. Now, hang on, this is in the middle of winter, right? This is normally the low point in the sales cycle, the listing cycle, isn't it?
That's correct, and so far, this is the highest number of listings this year.
Yeah.
So far. Now, I guess to bring it a little bit closer to home, and so the viewers can have a better understanding, when the property market went crazy last winter, and people panicked and started jumping in with throwing all sorts of money at the market and buying all sorts of silly property with so many inherent issues. At this time, we had, the numbers here are saying today there was 8,166 when I screenshot this report from Domain. Around this time last year, we were tracking very lower than 6,000 homes for sale on market, and as I said, we got to the shocking numbers in the mid fives, and we were going backwards. Yes, it was a seasonal change. People retreated. There was all sorts of things happening, and again, this is why you've got the mainstream spruikers now, and the and people that have got vested interests in the mortgage market, as we're going to share later on. With as to what they're saying and what they're calling for through the AFR and Sky and all these other mainstream publications. That's pretty much pull your properties off market. It's the 30%. We're looking at real clearance rates of in the 30s and so forth. I mean, it's that sort of narrative Two, again, keep the values of the properties, property prices high, because the more listings on market, the more that are being passed in, the more that people can negotiate down, as opposed to selling agents negotiating up.
Yeah, and the auction stats for the 2nd of July is showing, well, it's still there, but it's plenty of opportunity for being passed in, right?
Yeah, and look, they're there, but remember, 2 weeks ago we were at 1,100.
Yep.
So because the sentiment is no longer there. The confidence is coming off coming off, and people are losing the confidence. And selling agents themselves, they don't want to have what we call in the industry a stale listing on market either. They don't want the property to be passed in, and if the vendor is not prepped up to accept the bid on the day, if they know that they're better off taking it off the market and going private treaty, just cancelling the campaign altogether, because they're going to have a harder time to convince the vendor to come off that high expectation that they were promoting to the vendors 3-4 weeks ago when they were trying to get the listing. So it's a big drop. It's a big mind shift that they have to make, and so a lot more has to go. So they're better off taking the properties off, not going through that auction campaign in a way. And look, that's one way of looking at it. The other way is the vendors themselves. They're a bit scared, because the last thing you want to do is get a property get passed in at an auction and then stays on market stale, and then all sorts of thoughts start happening, going through people's minds, and of course the obvious is it's easier for buyers, or buyers are in a better position to negotiate down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the truth is that if you don't go to auction, but you just go to the private treaty, you don't have to pay the extra marketing cost for the auction, right? Which is an additional slug of money that you'd pay to the agent. So potentially you might save a bit of money on the way through too.
Yeah, look, it's how can I put it? It's a travesty that agents are allowed to do that, because the marketing campaigns are pretty much the same. Yeah, the only difference is between a normal campaign, you would call it a normal marketing campaign under a private treaty, and an auction campaign. The difference being is the auctioneer's fees that are paid upfront.
Yeah. But that's not the way the economics works, is it? Right?
No, because the agent, it's a way for the agencies to earn more dollars, because they get a drink out of that, big drink out of that. I would say 50% of it is used for genuine marketing, and the other 50% goes in the pockets of the selling agents. Yep. So if you look from people that are looking at selling, my advice would be, if you're going to look at selling, look at a private treaty campaign, and get the agents to work for their money. Years ago, I did a breakdown of cost of commissions as to the hours worked by an agent on a property, and the average fee that an agent was getting was $1,436 an hour. When you looked at the average commissions, average hours that they spend on the sale of a property, because we went down from a 3-month campaign or a 3-month agency fee to agency agreement to basically a 3-week campaign and the auction on the 4th, because it doesn't really benefit the vendor. It benefits the agent more than it does the vendor, and more so in this day and age, more so under these circumstances. So I would say, if you want my listing, you're going to work hard. You're not going to, none of this bullshit once a week, half an hour open for inspection campaigns. You're going to open the home 3 times a week, and you're going to spend an hour here giving people the time to go through and giving the right information. That's what you're expecting. You're paying, on average, $17,000 to $20,000 on average to sell a property in Sydney. So, make them work for it.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And at the moment, that is what you need to do. Agents won't like it, but that's the way it is. All right, let's move on quickly to the articles because we're running out of time. And there were three that you highlighted. The first one, mortgage stress. So there's now way more press about mortgage stress. I mean, I've been talking about this for a long time. And people are saying, well, maybe up to 40% of households could actually be in stress. Now, they define mortgage stress differently. So 30% of income is used to pay the mortgage. That's a very old-fashioned way of defining it. I use a different definition. I use a cash flow measure, money in, money out. But that still sticks because it used to be, of course, years ago that banks would actually use that as a measure of affordability. So the assumption was that if more than 30% of your income went to repay the mortgage, they wouldn't give you a loan. Well, I can tell you that in the last few years, most people in Sydney and Melbourne, and probably elsewhere too, are just committing themselves to way more than that. So this stress metric doesn't work anymore, and yet it's the one that's peddled.
That's right, and yet this is the one, and the people that are mostly caught up in it, I'd imagine from your surveys, are the first-time buyers and the ones that have jumped into the market with those lower percentage deposits.
Well, recent purchases, absolutely. A lot of first-time buyers, but also I'm seeing a lot of what I call affluent stress. So, younger, affluent households and also more wealthy, older households who are highly leveraged. They've often got multiple properties, investment properties as well, all leveraged, cross-leveraged off each other. And they're all finding the interest rates rising and it's really difficult. So the real story of mortgage stress is way more complicated than the mainstream media is talking about. But the trajectory is one way. It's going to get higher, a lot higher. And we are going to see more people really struggling. But remember what I do say, stress takes a long time to work out. So people can manage to keep their property because they prioritize paying their mortgage over other things, but they perhaps hunker down, put more on credit cards, do other things just to muddle through. The difficulty, Edwin, that I see is that the muddling through will just make things worse because rates are going to go higher in terms of interest rates and mortgage rates. The inflation rate's going to bite. I don't see strong wage growth coming through anytime soon, so people are now caught in this really, really torrid situation. So expect mortgage stress to run a lot higher. And when I run my scenarios over the next year or so, we go from 43% to closer to 50% unless something breaks or changes.
Yeah, and which means less disposable income for people to spend elsewhere, and so therefore then you got your sectors such as the tourism and also the hospitality.
And retail, of course. Retail is the one that's already fading in lots of areas. I see that in my other stress. I think it's the other point. Moving on to the second article, renters, of course, have huge pressure because their rents are rising. They've got big cost of living pressure too. And I measure rental stress, and that's now at about 46% of renters. So there are more renters in stress than owner-occupiers, right? That's a horribly high number. And we've seen a very considerable increase in rental stress, again, because the way I measure it is cash flow. So I look at how much they're paying on the rent and how much they're paying on other things too. And quite a few people who are renting have a lower income to start with. So a greater proportion of their income goes on non-discretionary spending. In other words, things they've got to spend money on. And that inflation rate at the moment is 6.6% as opposed to 5.1% for the overall inflation rate. Now that's the official rate. The unofficial rate is way higher than that in my view. So renters really under pressure.
Look, and this is the shameful part that we're in, and where governments have let us down, and this is where it's a blight on all governments and all types of governments that have really let us down with these policies, affordable housing policies, and so this is something that we're going to read more and more about, hear more and more about, and the unfortunate thing is we're going to also see how single parents are going to be the butt end or the tail end of all this, because they're going to be struggling. And then the greater issue, as we spoke earlier on, is you've got health. You've got then, unfortunately, you're also then going to end up with huge areas of high crime, and look, it's just going to get worse. It's just it's shameful.
Yeah, no, it is unfortunately that trajectory is not good, and as you quite rightly say, it flows over into social issues and health issues. And your point about single parent families, they are absolutely overrepresented both in mortgage stress and rental stress, right? So from a socio-economic perspective, that group is at some of the highest risk households out there, and I don't think enough is being done to recognise the problem, nor indeed to strategically try and solve it, because this is an issue that's been building not for a few months. This has been building for at least 20 odd years, right? And there's no evidence that I've seen at a federal or a state or even a local authority level of a real intent to solve this. It could be solved, but no, let's let the market be the market, and let's just go on stoking the market as we discussed earlier on.
Because we can't build anything decent, Martin. We can't build anything decent because if we build anything decent and we force the local governments to split this 900 square metre quarter acre blocks into duplexes or even medium density, let's say 4 villas like we used to, there'll be genuine affordable housing where the governments can participate in there. They could force developers like they used to. Make developers, rent a portion of the housing for these sort of situations in order for you to get your DA approved. But they stopped doing that because it
wonder why that was
too much of a brown paper bag issue.
Well, and also, of course, the monies to certain areas on bigger developments and upper market developments is perhaps bigger than. I think that the concept of embedding social housing in every development, that's what we should do. We shouldn't have ghettos of social housing. That doesn't work. But what we should have is every development should have a proportion that's dedicated to social housing as part of the process, and that should be the starting point rather than the exception, right? But boy, that would make a few people unhappy, wouldn't it?
Oh, look, it would. You would, we'll ruffle too many feathers, and too many politicians will lose equity in the property portfolios.
We can't have that, can we? And look, just talking about losing feathers, there was a hilarious piece from Peter Schweitzer, right, on Sky News. He solved the problem.
Yeah, like he has. The Switzer report, founder Peter Switzer says it is probably wise. You are a very wise person for Sydney residents to wait before selling their homes, as close to 30% of properties up for auction last weekend pulled out. So that is the wise decision that is again you. And then when you sort of think and you sort of start thinking, how many mortgage brokers does he employ? Doesn't he employ something like 31 or 27 or 47 mortgage brokers? And what do mortgage brokers deal with? Don't they deal with investors and people with large property portfolios? Fancy that. And what would that do if people did start listening to these stories from the AFR, Sky, and all this mainstream media? Of course, that's going to do what we're saying, that the government needs to happen, and that is for listings to go down considerably, drop at least 20%.
Get prices to go up. A completely disinterested comment then from him, right, in terms of that suggestion. Hey, well, there, what a surprise. All right, tip of the week. It is worth just highlighting this, right? Don't go and buy at the auction.
Obviously different circumstances, different scenarios, but in a broad sense, and I'm talking about broadly. Look, you get a better deal post auction. Yeah, you're going to get a better deal post auction, be it by terms, be it by the fact that you could also, what I push for now, and I have in a couple of negotiations, I've pushed for the 66W. In other words, buying with basically not without a cooling off period, because that's what you buy under auction terms. Waiving that the cooling off. I say no, I want that introduced because I want to make sure. I want to make sure for our client's sake, particularly if it's if depending on the again go back to the LVR, and the LVR is an issue, and that is something that's happening. I'm coming across more and more in different parts of Sydney. It's not just in one area now; it's pretty much all over Sydney that valuations are not coming in.
Yep,
they're coming short. So that's your problem. So get a better deal. Way, not necessarily by way of price, but more so in terms. You're better off losing a 0.25%, which is a 0.25% deposit, than you are losing 10% deposit or having to come up with an extra 50, 60, 80, 100, $150,000 in order to meet the valuation that the bank's given that property because of the circumstance.
Yeah. Valuations down in some areas now, down 15% from where they were even 6 months ago. And they've had strong direction from some of the lenders in terms of that. And in some cases, the valuers are now taking their own initiative and saying, given where we are, the market is now off. So that's going to be another downward spiral in terms of price. And that means you've got to be really careful, right? Because, what you don't want to do is commit yourself at a higher valuation than you can actually get in terms of the loan. And I'm hearing lots of stories of banks who gave a provisional agreement a few weeks ago, and then they go and get a property and go back and knock on the door and say, can we have the loan, please? And they say, oh, no, we've changed, right? Sorry, you are now 10% less able to borrow them previously. And they get themselves caught in this awful situation where they've made the commitment on one side based on one set of facts, and now the facts have changed. So again, I think, cautious, buy post the auction, spot on. There are things you should be doing now.
Yeah, and I'll back you up totally with that. And a lot of our viewers will probably say, well, how can that be? Look, I've had those the circumstances, and when you read the mortgage document, you find that is not the bank doesn't necessarily have to give you the money. No. It's not until the bank solicitors basically stamp it that you can get your money. Correct. And as you say, Martin, that could pull. They could pull, even if it's what they call a formal offer post evaluation. Yep. They could pull it for Correct. Any reason. They may see somebody may pick up something on the application that's would have been totally irrelevant a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. But now all of a sudden it's become relevant. And guess what? You can whistle Dixie if you put a 10% deposit.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that small print is not necessarily easy to understand, right? So you've got the provisional sort of offer, you've got a conditional offer, then you've got an offer, but until you've actually crystallized it, you don't know what you got. And that's the real problem for many people.
Until PEXA tells your conveyancer or your solicitor that the matter has settled.
Correct.
It isn't. But even then, it's not yours. No. until you've paid the debt.
Yeah, I was going to say, then you pay the mortgage off, and that's 30 or 40 or 50 years later. So, yeah, you're basically just a renter under another name. But that's a whole new, another story for another day. Edwin, once again, thank you very much. Great conversation. Very important issues again touched on tonight. And, of course, we'll be back next week for next week's exciting instalment of Where Are the Prices Going to Go Next?
And hopefully in a warmer environment.
Well, it'll be difficult to get colder. Take care, Edwin. Keep warm. Bye-bye.